You're about to witness one of the most calculated acts of psychological warfare ever carried out in history. For 76 days, they didn't merely imprison Marie Antoinette, they dismantled her humanity one deliberate piece at a time, and the first blow didn't come from chains or threats. It came from an 8-year-old boy. Forget everything you think you know about the guillotine. That blade was mercy. What came before, it was something far darker, because the revolutionaries discovered her one true vulnerability and exploited it with a cruelty that still stains the historical record. This is the story of prisoner 280, and I'm going to show you exactly what they did to her. It's the middle of the night, July 3rd, 1793, inside the Temple prison in Paris. Stone corridors swallow every sound except one. Boots, heavy, purposeful, getting closer. Marie Antoinette is lying beside her 8-year-old son, Louis Charles. Her hand rests on his chest. She hasn't let him out of her sight since they executed his father 6 months ago. Then the door bursts open. 6 guards storm in, their torches shaking, a document held out like a weapon. An official order. They've come for the boy. What happens next echoes through those walls for a full hour. A former queen becomes something primal. A mother fighting for her child with the last shards of strength she has left. She hurls her body at the door. She screams until her voice splinters. She begs them to take her instead. But here's what makes this moment so much more agonizing. This isn't chaos. It isn't impulsive violence. It's precision. Because by now, the revolutionaries had learned something crucial. Marie Antoinette couldn't be broken by hunger or filth or humiliation. But she could be broken by love, and they were about to use her son to crush her long before the guillotine ever touched her neck. Before we descend further into the horrors ahead, you need to understand who Marie Antoinette really was, because the woman they tortured in 1793 was nothing like the caricature history painted on pamphlets and propaganda posters. She was born Maria Antonia in Vienna in 1755, an Austrian archduchess and the youngest daughter of Empress Maria Theresa. At just 14, she was married off to the future King Louis XVI of France. This wasn't romance, this was geopolitics. France and Austria needed an alliance, and she was the price. The French court despised her immediately. She was Austrian, an enemy. She was young and awkward, unfamiliar with French customs. They mocked her accent, her clothes, even the way she walked. Her own husband ignored her for years. Their marriage wasn't consummated until 7 years in, a humiliation that became gossip across Europe. So, she did what any isolated teenager might do in a world built to scrutinize her. She escaped into pleasures she could control, elaborate hairstyles, extravagant gowns, evenings at her private retreat, the Petit Trianon. Meanwhile, the French people were starving. They watched her indulgence from a distance and gave her a name that would haunt her, Madame Deficit. Did she ever say, "Let them eat cake"? No, pure propaganda. But the damage was already done. By the time the revolution erupted in 1789, Marie Antoinette had become the perfect scapegoat. Foreign, privileged, female, and royal. She wasn't the monster they accused her of being. She was simply the easiest target. But here's the detail that matters most. By 1793, she wasn't a carefree queen anymore. She was a mother of 4 who had watched her eldest son die at age 7. She had seen her husband dragged to the guillotine. She had spent months locked in the Temple prison with her remaining children, waiting every day for someone to announce that it was her turn next. She had already lost her crown, her home, her freedom, her country. But the revolutionaries wanted her to understand she still had more to lose. Let me show you the Temple prison, because this place was engineered to break people before they ever reached the guillotine. It was a medieval fortress, damp and suffocating, originally built by the Knights Templar. After Louis XVI was executed in January 1793, Marie Antoinette and her 2 surviving children, 14-year-old Marie Thérèse and 8-year-old Louis Charles, were locked inside a tower. Guards watched them constantly. At first, the family was kept together. Marie Antoinette tried to create some semblance of normalcy. She taught lessons. She prayed with them. At night, when the roar of revolutionary mobs swelled outside, she held her children close and promised them safety she knew she couldn't guarantee. But the guards were always there, staring, taking notes, reporting everything to the Committee of Public Safety. And they noticed something. She could endure anything except harm toward her children. So they began experimenting with psychological torture. First, they restricted her access to the children's rooms so severely she had to beg for permission just to see them. Then they installed additional guards inside their quarters, men who sat in chairs, silent and unblinking, watching every moment of affection, every tear, every whispered prayer. The children weren't allowed to speak German, their mother's native language. They had to use French, ensuring even their most private moments were controlled by the state. Marie Antoinette started to unravel. Her brown hair began turning white, a real medical condition later nicknamed Marie Antoinette syndrome. She grew thin. She developed hemorrhaging she desperately tried to hide from the guards. And yet, she endured it all because she still had her children. The revolutionaries realized they needed to take that from her too. July 3rd, 1793. The night that would define the end of her life. Primary testimony from those present describes what happened with chilling precision. Around 10 p.m., Marie Antoinette had just settled Louis Charles into bed. Her daughter and sister-in-law were in nearby rooms. Then came the sound. Boots on the stairs. The door slammed open. 6 guards marched in with a decree from the Committee of Public Safety. They were there to take the boy away, to re-educate him under the Republic. Marie-Thérèse later wrote about this moment. She said her mother transformed instantly from composed to feral. Marie Antoinette threw herself between the guards and her sleeping son. She clutched him so tightly he woke up screaming. And then she unleashed a sound so raw it didn't belong in a palace or prison. It belonged in the wilderness. "You will not take him. You will have to kill me first. He is just a child." For an hour, 60 shattering minutes, she blocked the doorway, fighting 6 grown men with nothing but desperation. They threatened her. They threatened her son. They threatened her daughter. They warned her that if she didn't comply, they would use force and someone would be hurt. Still, she fought. Finally, her sister-in-law begged her to stop. The children were screaming. The guards were becoming violent. Marie Antoinette broke. She kissed Louis Charles one final time, whispered something no one ever recorded, and watched as her son was pried from her arms and dragged down the stairs. His screams faded into the stone. She collapsed and didn't move for hours. And the cruelty had only begun. What happened next was worse than anything Marie Antoinette had endured so far. The revolutionaries didn't just take her son. They delivered him into the hands of a man named Antoine Simon, a radical cobbler chosen specifically for his lack of compassion. His assignment wasn't guardianship. It was destruction. Louis Charles was locked in a dark, windowless room. He was forced to wear a red revolutionary cap, taught to chant anti-monarchy songs, and pushed to curse his own mother. When he resisted, Simon beat him, starved him, and kept him in isolation until obedience became survival. Within weeks, the boy began to repeat whatever they told him. Even things so grotesque, so impossible, they would later be weaponized against his mother as the final blow. Marie Antoinette didn't know the details yet, but she felt them. Every mother's instinct told her her son was suffering, and she was powerless to save him. That helplessness was the point. And then came the next step in their plan. On August 1st, 1793, less than a month after they ripped her son away, Marie Antoinette was jolted awake in the middle of the night. Guards flooded her room at 2 a.m. No explanation, no time to gather herself. Just an abrupt order, she was being transferred. They separated her from her daughter and her sister-in-law. She begged, for the first time in her life, to say goodbye. They refused. The guards dragged her down the stairs where she had last seen her son vanish, shoved her into a carriage, and drove her through the sleeping city toward a place every prisoner feared, the conciergerie. If the temple was a prison, the conciergerie was the waiting room for death, the antechamber to the guillotine. No one was sent there unless execution was inevitable. Her transfer wasn't just procedural, it was an omen. When she arrived, she wasn't Marie Antoinette anymore. They stripped her name and replaced it with a number, 280. She was taken to a narrow 12 by 8 foot cell. Damp stone walls pressed inward, slick with mold. A thin straw mattress lay on the floor. A wooden table, 2 chairs, a chamber pot, and 1 candle. That was her world. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get more dehumanizing, they added something else, a folding privacy screen. It sounds humane at first, but it was nothing more than a cruel illusion, because her cell had 2 armed guards inside it at all times. They sat in the corner, watching her sleep, watching her eat, watching her change clothes behind that pointless screen. They watched when she used the chamber pot. They watched when she prayed, when she cried, when she bled. There was no moment, not even seconds, when she wasn't being stared at. This wasn't security. It was psychological torture, a slow suffocation of identity. According to multiple accounts, Marie Antoinette tried to maintain a shred of composure. She sat for hours, perfectly still, staring at the wall with a blankness that frightened even the guards. She barely spoke, she barely moved, she barely ate. But at night, when the candle flickered low and she thought the darkness might hide her, they still heard her soft sobs, her voice breaking as she whispered her son's name, Louis Charles, Louis Charles, over and over like a prayer that no longer had anyone listening. Her health began to deteriorate quickly. She suffered from severe hemorrhaging, possibly uterine cancer or stress-induced complications. She bled through her clothes and had to request rags from guards who stared at her with no trace of empathy. Her once famous hair, now completely white, fell out in clumps. At 37, she looked decades older, and then came the final humiliation. Her trial, October 14th, 1793, 8 in the morning. Marie Antoinette was pulled from her cell and brought before the Revolutionary Tribunal. This wasn't justice, it was theater. The verdict had been decided before she took her seat, but they wanted a show. They wanted her broken publicly, recorded in history as the monster they needed her to be. The courtroom was overflowing. Officials, journalists, citizens hungry for spectacle packed the benches. The prosecutor, Antoine Fouquier-Tinville, began reading out the charges: treason, conspiracy, financial corruption. Everything from sending secret letters to Austria to personally orchestrating military plots. She responded with calmness that surprised even her enemies. She denied the lies, acknowledged mistakes, but refused to grovel, and that's when Fouquier-Tinville played his final, most venomous card. He called a witness, Jacques Hébert, a radical journalist. Hébert stood before the crowd and repeated accusations allegedly made by Louis Charles, Marie Antoinette's 8-year-old son. Testimony the revolutionaries had forced from him. Testimony that claimed his mother committed incest with him. The entire room froze. Even the most hardened revolutionaries felt the air shift. They had come to see a queen fall, but this accusation was something else, something that scraped against the boundaries of human decency. Marie Antoinette, who had remained steady through every slander, finally broke. She rose slowly, her voice trembling but clear. She didn't speak to the judges, she didn't speak to her accuser. She turned her head toward the women in the room, mothers, daughters, wives, and appealed directly to them. "I appeal to all mothers present," she said. "Is there one among you who would not shudder at such a charge?" Oh, silence. Then murmurs. Then tears. Women who had come expecting to cheer her downfall found themselves unable to look at her without seeing their own child in that accusation. She continued, "Nature itself refuses to respond to such an accusation made against a mother. That single moment, those few sentences, pierced the revolutionary narrative more deeply than any political defense ever could have. For an instant, she wasn't a queen, a foreigner, or a symbol. She was simply a mother.